My husband Jake and I have been married for 5 years, and up until recently, I truly believed our life was pretty steady. Things weren't perfect, but they were solid. That illusion started to crack thanks to my younger sister, Sally. She's always been the kind of person who needs to feel like she's outdoing everyone around her, especially me. Growing up, it was mostly harmless stuff. She'd show off about getting better grades, being invited to more birthday parties, or how many people signed her yearbook. I assumed it was typical sibling rivalry and that she'd eventually grow out of it. Clearly, I miscalculated. About 2 years ago, Sally started dating my husband's younger brother, Andrew. It all kicked off at a family barbecue, one of those casual get-togethers where people drink too much lemonade and complain about the heat. They clicked right away, and before long, they were practically glued to each other. At first, I thought it was kind of sweet. Jake was over the moon about it, thinking our families growing closer was the best thing ever. I was more hesitant. I've always had mixed feelings about combining family and romance, but I figured it might actually be nice to have my sister as my sister-in-law. Spoiler alert, I couldn't have been more wrong. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Sally started turning every interaction into this weird, low-key contest. She'd make offhand remarks that seemed innocent on the surface but clearly had an edge. Stuff like, "Your house is so cozy, Andrew and I are looking at something bigger, but this is adorable," or "Jake's still at his old job? That's so sweet, he's so loyal. Andrew's probably taking a more senior role soon." I tried brushing it off. That's just Sally being Sally, right? But it wasn't just occasional, it was constant. And it started getting to me. When Sally and Andrew got engaged around 6 months ago, I was genuinely happy for them. I congratulated her, offered to help with wedding planning, even shared advice from my own experience. She politely shut me down, saying, "Thanks, but we're doing something completely different than what you did, no offense." I didn't take it personally at the time, but looking back, it was the beginning of something much bigger. They decided to throw a wedding that looked like it was ripped straight from a luxury bridal magazine. I mean, everything was over the top. The venue alone probably cost more than Jake and I make in a year. She had a custom designer gown, a 5-tier cake, a live band, and over 250 people on the guest list. Even the bachelor and bachelorette parties were destination events in Vegas. And at every single family gathering, Sally treated her wedding like a personal victory lap. "We're trying to set a new family standard," she'd say. "It's going to be more of an experience than a wedding." And while all that was annoying enough, it was the jabs at my marriage that really started to sting. She'd say things like, "Andrew always surprises me with little gifts, does Jake do that for you?" Or, "I feel so lucky to have found someone as driven as Andrew." It felt like a constant comparison, and I was tired of being measured against her fantasy version of perfection. Jake told me to ignore it, but it wore me down. Things came to a head during the wedding planning. Unbeknownst to Sally, both our parents and Jake's parents had started to quietly worry about how much money she and Andrew were blowing through. Andrew has a decent job, but he's buried in student debt, and Sally doesn't work. Her tastes, though, are anything but budget-friendly. None of the parents wanted to see them start married life drowning in financial stress, so they decided to chip in. Jake and I even pitched in a pretty generous amount ourselves just to be kind and keep the peace. We never told anyone. We didn't want credit or drama. It was a goodwill gesture, and we kept it quiet. Sally assumed Andrew was covering everything, and she acted like the luckiest bride in the world. "I'm just so blessed to have a man who can give me my dream wedding," she'd gush. I let it go. Let her believe it if it made her feel good. But then came the wedding day, and everything spiraled in a direction I never saw coming. The ceremony was stunning. I won't lie, it was beautiful. The decorations were tasteful, the venue looked straight out of a fairy tale, and Sally did look absolutely radiant. For most of the reception, I kept a polite distance. I didn't want any drama ruining her big day. And then came the toasts. Sally stood up to give her speech. She started sweet, thanking the guests and saying heartfelt things about Andrew. But then, out of nowhere, she slipped in a nasty little comment about how not everyone gets the better end of the deal, and how she felt so lucky to have a husband who could afford to make her dreams come true. The entire room went dead quiet. It was obvious she was taking a dig at me. I could feel every pair of eyes shift toward our table. My face felt like it was on fire. Jake reached over and squeezed my hand under the table, silently begging me not to react. But then, something I never expected happened. My mother-in-law stood up. She's usually the type to stay quiet, stay polite, avoid conflict at all costs. So when she spoke up, I was stunned. Calmly and clearly, she told the room that Jake and I had paid for a significant portion of the wedding. Dead silence. Sally's face turned sheet white. She tried to laugh it off, but it was obvious she was completely humiliated. The rest of the night was beyond awkward. People whispered in corners. Sally avoided me like the plague. After the wedding, she confronted me. She accused me of embarrassing her and letting my mother-in-law ruin her moment. I told her the truth, that none of this was planned, and we never meant for it to come out. But her constant need to compete had finally pushed things too far. She ran off crying, and we haven't spoken since. Andrew texted Jake the next day, apologizing for the drama and saying Sally felt betrayed, that she believed we'd made her look bad on purpose by hiding the fact we helped. Jake told him the truth. We never wanted this to become public, but Sally's toast had crossed a line. Andrew seemed to get it. But Sally? She's been telling anyone who will listen that I sabotaged her entire wedding. Now mutual friends are reaching out, asking what really happened. Some are taking her side, saying my mother-in-law was out of line. Others think Sally had it coming. I never asked for this chaos, but it feels like my relationship with my sister is shattered beyond repair. At this point, I honestly don't know what to say to her. I never wanted things to turn out like this. If anyone's got advice, I'm all ears. Update 1. The fallout after the wedding was way worse than I expected, and honestly, I should have seen it coming. Instead of disappearing quietly for a while like I hoped, Sally went full scorched earth on social media. Even though she never named us directly, everything she posted felt like a direct shot at Jake and me. It started the next day with those vague, passive-aggressive Instagram stories. Things like, some people just can't stand to see you happy, and it's always the ones closest to you who hurt you the most. A few hours later, she posted a meme that said, fake family is worse than fake friends. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe Sally's vague social media posts weren't about me, that she was just having a bad day and blowing off steam. But once the actual content started rolling in, it became painfully obvious who the target was. She put up this long, over-the-top status update, practically dripping with bitterness. She didn't name names, but the message was loud and clear. She talked about people who pretend to support you just to stay in control and only help you so they can take credit when things go well. It was full of these dramatic accusations about betrayal and manipulation. Lines like, I thought family was supposed to lift you up, not sabotage you, made it impossible to pretend this wasn't aimed at me and Jake. The comments flooded in. Her friends, and even a few distant cousins we barely talked to, jumped in with the usual echo chamber replies, you've got this, girl, cut the toxic ones out of your life, and real queens don't need fake friends. Meanwhile, my phone practically exploded. Friends, extended relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in ages, they were all messaging me, asking what the hell was going on. Some of my cousins reached out privately, wanting to hear my side. Jake's relatives weren't quite as subtle. His aunts and uncles started blowing up my in-laws' phones, either fishing for gossip or acting concerned, sometimes both at the same time. It honestly felt like we were suddenly starring in some weird family reality show. But what shocked me most was the reaction from Andrew's side of the family. His siblings were downright embarrassed by Sally's behavior. Andrew's older sister Rachel, who's been tight with Jake for years, called us almost immediately to say how sorry she was for the mess. She was livid. She couldn't believe Sally would turn around and publicly trash us after everything we'd done to help them. Rachel didn't sugarcoat a thing, she flat out said Sally was acting entitled, immature, and completely out of line. She even said Andrew needed to get her under control before she burned every bridge in the family. And you know what? I agreed with her. I hated the drama, but Rachel wasn't wrong. Our moms got dragged into the mess too. My mom was heartbroken. She called me crying, saying she didn't understand why Sally was lashing out like this and asking if there was any way to fix things. On the other hand, Jake's mom, who was the one who dropped the truth bomb at the wedding, took a more practical stance. She told me she didn't regret speaking up because someone needed to call Sally out. But even she admitted the fallout was uglier than she expected. The two moms started talking constantly, trying to figure out a way to de-escalate everything before it got worse. My mom floated the idea of having a sit-down, some kind of family intervention, but Jake's mom shut it down immediately. She said Sally was too wrapped up in her own victim narrative right now, and trying to talk sense into her would only make things worse. Unfortunately, she was right. Because Sally didn't just keep her grudge on Instagram. She started reaching out to people directly, spreading her twisted version of what happened. One of the first people she called was my close friend Sarah. And apparently, Sally didn't hold back. She told Sarah that Jake and I had deliberately sabotaged her wedding just to make ourselves look good. She even accused me of being jealous of her ever since we were kids and said this was my way of getting even. Luckily, Sarah didn't buy a word of it. But the fact that Sally was dragging my friends into her meltdown? That pushed me over the edge. Turns out, Sarah wasn't the only one. Sally had been reaching out to some of Jake's cousins, too, trying to sway them to her side. A few shut her down immediately and told her to drop it, but others just nodded along or stayed quiet. Either way, the damage was done. Word was spreading, and so was the tension. And then Sally did something I never thought she'd do. She turned on our parents. She called our mom in the middle of the night, accusing her of choosing sides and favoring me like she always had. My mom, who was already devastated, tried to explain that she loved us both and just wanted the family to heal. But Sally wasn't interested in peace. She told my mom she felt like a stranger in her own family and that she'd been treated like second best her whole life. That call shattered my mom. And she didn't stop there. She also phoned Jake's mom, demanding an apology for publicly humiliating her at the wedding. But Jake's mom stood her ground. She calmly told Sally that she only spoke up because her toast had been cruel and unfair, and that instead of complaining, she should have been thankful for the support everyone gave her. Sally hung up on her. They haven't spoken since. Meanwhile, Andrew was caught in the crossfire. Jake and I didn't hear much from him, but according to Rachel, he was a wreck. Completely stressed out, trying to play both sides without upsetting Sally. Rachel said he felt guilty about how everything played out, but was too scared to defend us because it might set Sally off again. Jake and I tried to lay low. We didn't respond, didn't post anything, didn't take the bait. But staying quiet didn't stop the ripple effect. Some mutual friends started pulling away, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. A few even unfollowed Sally because her constant emotional outbursts were just too much. The breaking point came about a week after the wedding. I got this long, emotional email from Sally that made my stomach turn. It was chaotic, full of contradictions. One paragraph she was furious, the next she was playing the victim. She accused me of ruining her big day, stealing her spotlight, and being jealous of her since forever. Then she demanded that both Jake and I apologize, and told us that unless we could learn to be supportive, we should just stay out of her life altogether. I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't make things worse. Jake agreed. At this point, we needed to step back and let her spiral out on her own. But deep down, I couldn't help but wonder, is this even something she can move past? Or is this just who Sally is now? Update 2. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get more absurd, Sally went and did something I never, in a million years, would have expected. She showed up at my job. It was just another Monday. I was at my desk, sorting through emails and sipping coffee, when the receptionist called to say someone was in the lobby asking to see me. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I told her to send them up. A few minutes later, Sally came bursting through the door like a storm. No warning. No greeting. Just rage. Before I could even stand up, she launched into a full-blown meltdown right there in front of my coworkers. She started yelling about how I had betrayed her, destroyed her wedding, and made her look like an idiot in front of everyone. And that is where it really went off the rails. The second Sally stormed into my office, the whole place froze. My coworkers stopped typing, talking everything. They just stared, jaws hanging open, unsure if they were witnessing a real-life meltdown or a prank. I felt the heat crawling up my neck as I tried to keep my cool and calmly asked her to leave. But Sally wasn't listening. Instead, she doubled down, screaming louder, accusing me of sabotaging her life, stealing her wedding, and making her look pathetic on purpose. Her voice echoed down the hallway like a fire alarm. People peeked out of their offices, confused and shocked, watching the chaos unfold like it was some unhinged soap opera. Security was called in almost immediately. 2 guards showed up and politely tried to lead her out, but of course, she made a whole scene in the lobby. She yelled that I was a fake sister and shouted that our entire family was conspiring against her. By the time they finally removed her from the building, I was absolutely mortified. My boss, who had witnessed most of the scene firsthand, called me into his office right after. I was fully bracing myself for some kind of professional scolding. Instead, he completely surprised me. He was kind, even compassionate. He said he understood that family drama can spiral out of control and told me not to worry about my job. He even offered me a few days off to regroup. He mentioned that he actually knew Jake through some mutual industry contacts and had only ever heard good things about us. It was a much-needed lifeline in a moment that felt like everything was unraveling. When Jake found out what happened, he was furious. Absolutely livid. He couldn't believe Sally would go that far, showing up at my workplace and causing a public spectacle. His first instinct was to file a restraining order right then and there. But I wasn't sure. I didn't know if we were ready to take that kind of legal step. That said, the emotional toll was undeniable. I felt like I was living on edge, constantly checking over my shoulder, flinching at every phone notification, and scanning crowds in public places just in case she appeared again. Our peaceful home no longer felt like a refuge, it felt like Sally's chaos had followed us inside. Jake and I spent night after night lying awake, going in circles over what we should do. Should we take legal action? Or keep trying to protect what was left of our already strained family relationships? Jake leaned toward protecting us, no matter the fallout. I, on the other hand, was still clinging to the hope that Sally might snap out of whatever spiral she was in. Then, just when I thought things couldn't possibly get worse, my mom called me in tears. Sally had ambushed her in the middle of a Target store. Yep, Target. My mom lives nearly 40 minutes away from Sally, so it wasn't like they ran into each other by accident. Sally had clearly made a deliberate trip, probably just to confront her. My mom said she'd been browsing in the home goods aisle when Sally suddenly appeared. At first, she thought it was just an awkward coincidence. She smiled and greeted her, trying to keep things civil despite everything. But Sally didn't waste a second getting to the point. According to my mom, Sally immediately launched into a full-blown rant, saying I was always the favored child, and that our parents had constantly put me on a pedestal while ignoring her. She accused my mom of turning a blind eye to all the times I manipulated everyone and stole her spotlight. Then she dredged up childhood stuff, claiming I always got better birthday parties, more praise, more everything. It was like every grudge she'd ever held came pouring out in one public meltdown, and my mom was the easiest target. Bless her heart, my mom tried to stay composed. She gently explained, over and over, that she loved both of us equally and never intentionally showed favoritism. She said she just wanted the family to move forward and stop tearing itself apart. But Sally wasn't interested in reconciliation. She kept interrupting, shouting her down, accusing her of being blind to the truth. My mom said Sally's tone was harsh, aggressive, even borderline threatening. It was like she came there looking for a fight. The confrontation lasted close to 20 minutes, right in the middle of the store, with other shoppers awkwardly pretending not to notice. By the time Sally stormed off, my mom was completely rattled. She called me from her car, still shaking, her voice trembling as she recounted everything. Hearing her that upset broke my heart. My mom is one of the most patient, kind-hearted people I know. She didn't deserve to be pulled into this disaster. I tried to reassure her, told her she hadn't done anything wrong, and reminded her that Sally's issues had nothing to do with her. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. I knew it wasn't my fault, but I hated that my mom was now another casualty of Sally's downward spiral. Jake, though? He was done playing nice. He stormed around the living room as I told him what happened, pacing, fists clenched, jaw tight. This is harassment, he said quietly, but firmly. She's not just targeting you anymore. Now she's going after your mom. Enough is enough. And by enough, Jake meant it was time to get legal involved. He'd been pushing for that ever since Sally's stunt at my job, and now he was more determined than ever. She's not stopping. She's escalating. And we're just sitting here hoping it blows over. It's not going to. As much as I hated the idea of taking legal action against my own sister, I knew he was right. Sally wasn't slowing down, she was doubling down. Every time I thought she'd reached the bottom, she dug deeper. We couldn't keep pretending this was going to resolve itself. Over the next few days, we had long, serious conversations. Filing for a restraining order was now on the table. But we worried about what that would do to the rest of the family, especially our parents, who were already walking a tightrope just trying to stay neutral. I didn't want to break their hearts even more, but I also didn't want Sally to keep wrecking our lives. Meanwhile, Andrew was clearly drowning. He sent Jake a message apologizing over and over for Sally's behavior. You could tell he was ashamed and completely overwhelmed. According to Rachel, he was at a total loss and had no idea how to de-escalate things. Rachel herself called me, mostly just to vent. She said Sally's behavior had become the hot topic of every family gathering, and nobody could believe how far things had gone. She even said their relatives were wondering what the hell Andrew had gotten himself into by marrying her. Rachel suggested that maybe Sally needed professional help, counseling, therapy, anything. I agreed. The problem was, I couldn't imagine Sally ever admitting she needed help. To her, everyone else was the problem. And just when I thought her social media couldn't get worse, it did. Now, her posts were filled with vague, ominous references to being harassed and not feeling safe. It was clear she was painting herself as the victim in some grand tragedy, one she was completely writing in her head. Not long after the Target incident, Sally posted a photo of herself online with a dramatic caption that read, "Some people want to see you fall, but I'll keep standing tall." She didn't say my name, of course, but the implication was loud and clear. And because most of her followers didn't know the full story, they flooded the comments with blind support. Messages like "You're so strong," and "Don't let the haters win," started pouring in. That made things even more awkward. A few mutual friends began pulling away, not necessarily picking sides, just disappearing. Some told me they didn't want to get involved. Others simply stopped answering my texts altogether. It hurt. I'd built those friendships over years, and now they were unraveling because of one person's inability to own her behavior. As the days dragged on, I started to feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at night, playing the whole situation over and over in my head, trying to figure out where everything went so wrong. Jake was the only reason I didn't completely fall apart. He kept reminding me that we hadn't done anything wrong, that this wasn't on us. And while I appreciated his support more than I could say, I couldn't shake the feeling that I truly lost my sister. For good. Then the final blow arrived. I got a letter in the mail from Sally. A handwritten one. Several pages long. She accused me of turning the entire family against her, destroying her reputation, and, somehow, trying to take over her life. Her words were filled with resentment, twisting everything that had happened into a story where I was the villain. She ended the letter by saying she never wanted anything to do with me again unless I apologized for everything. I didn't write back. I didn't even know how to begin. At this point, it felt like no amount of explanation or apology would ever be enough for her. In her mind, I was the enemy. And there was no getting through to her anymore. So Jake and I decided it was time to focus on ourselves. On moving forward. On rebuilding some kind of peace in our lives. But the damage Sally caused? It feels permanent. I honestly don't know if our family will ever recover from this. Update 3. Things took a turn I wasn't expecting because Jake's entire family decided to take a stand. His parents, his siblings, even some of the extended relatives had reached their breaking point. It started with a big group text that quickly turned into an emergency family meeting. And the message they sent out was clear: they were done sweeping Sally's behavior under the rug. Jake and I weren't invited to the meeting, which, to be honest, was a relief. I couldn't imagine sitting through what I knew would be a tense, uncomfortable confrontation. Still, we got the full recap later, courtesy of Rachel and Andrew. And honestly, it sounded like a courtroom drama. Apparently, Andrew's dad, who's a no-nonsense corporate lawyer and usually avoids family drama like the plague, had finally had enough. He didn't just show up to talk. He came prepared. Rachel said he walked into that meeting with a literal folder full of documents. This wasn't a casual let's chat kind of gathering. It was a full-on financial reckoning. He started by laying out, in exact detail, every single contribution Jake and I had made toward the wedding. From the down payment on the extravagant venue to the designer flowers, premium catering, and all the extras, he had receipts for everything. Rachel told us it was almost surreal hearing the numbers spoken out loud. What had felt like small acts of kindness here and there turned out to be a massive sum when added up. And we weren't the only ones. Andrew's dad also outlined the contributions from the rest of the family. Jake's parents had paid for the open bar and part of the wedding planner fees. Andrew's siblings had covered the destination bachelor and bachelorette parties. Even extended family members had chipped in for decorations, party favors, and last-minute expenses. By the end of it, the total was staggering. And then came the real bombshell. Andrew's dad calmly stated that while the family had supported Andrew and Sally's vision for a big wedding, they'd been completely blindsided by how irresponsibly everything had been handled. He didn't sugarcoat a thing. He said flat out that the extravagance wasn't just unnecessary, it was reckless. And then, he pivoted to the real issue, the fallout. He said that Sally's behavior online and in real life had crossed a line. That it wasn't just embarrassing for her anymore, it was damaging the family's name. From the social media rants, to the workplace meltdown, to the Target confrontation, she had dragged everyone's reputation through the mud. And they weren't going to sit quietly anymore. Then came the ultimatum. Rachel said he delivered it like a lawyer in a closing argument, clear, direct, no wiggle room. Sally and Andrew had two choices. Option 1, repay every single cent that had been contributed to their wedding. No exceptions, no delays. If they refused, legal action would follow. Option 2, Sally had to issue a formal, public apology not just to Jake and me, but to the entire family. And it couldn't be some vague, passive-aggressive post. It had to be genuine, sincere. She needed to take responsibility for the chaos she caused and the people she hurt. Rachel said the room was so tense you could have heard a pin drop. Andrew, who had been mostly quiet until that point, tried to jump in. He said Sally had been under a lot of stress, that things got out of hand, and she never meant for things to spiral the way they did. But his dad wasn't having it. He shut it down firmly but without anger. He told Andrew that while stress might explain poor behavior, it doesn't excuse it. And it certainly doesn't justify dragging the whole family through the mud. As for Sally? Rachel said she sat there in complete silence. No yelling. No arguing. Nothing. Which, coming from Sally, was honestly the most shocking part of all. Over the last few weeks, Sally had been more erratic than ever, so when Rachel told me what happened in that final family meeting, I was honestly stunned. She said it was the first time she'd ever seen Sally completely speechless, genuinely unsure of what to say. By the end of the meeting, there was no wiggle room left. The family had drawn a hard line: take accountability and begin repairing the damage, or deal with the consequences. Andrew and Rachel later told us that the message wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect. About basic decency. Two things Sally had been lacking for a long time. Andrew, who had mostly stayed on the sidelines while everything spiraled, finally spoke up. He admitted he felt caught in the middle, torn between standing by his wife and being deeply frustrated by her behavior. He apologized to his parents and siblings and said this wasn't what he ever wanted. You could tell he was ashamed, desperate to fix what was left of his relationship with the family. In the end, Sally reluctantly agreed to the terms. Rachel said she looked completely defeated, like someone who had finally realized she'd burned every bridge in sight. She even tried to shift the story, again positioning herself as the misunderstood victim. But this time, no one was buying it. Not long after that meeting, I got a text from Sally. It was exactly what I expected: a weak, emotionless attempt at damage control. Just 2 lines. "I'm sorry for how things went down. Can we talk?" That was it. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to answer, wanted to try and untangle the wreckage of our relationship. But the other part of me? The part that was exhausted, emotionally worn out, and done with being dragged into her chaos, knew it was time to walk away. Jake and I talked about it that night. He was clear. No more chances. No more grace for someone who never truly wanted reconciliation. We'd bent over backward for Sally, and every single time, she'd found a way to twist the knife. This latest apology felt like just another performance, more about saving face than actually making amends. So the next day, we made a decision. I blocked her number. I unfollowed her on every social platform. I told my parents that, for now, we needed distance from the entire situation. They were heartbroken, of course, but supportive. They saw how much this had drained me, how deeply it had affected Jake, and they understood that we had to put our emotional well-being first. Sally's reaction was predictable. She went straight back to social media, posting more cryptic messages, this time about losing family to lies and standing tall despite betrayal. But something had changed. The comments weren't pouring in like before. The likes were fewer. Even her most loyal defenders seemed tired. Meanwhile, Andrew quietly began making payments toward the wedding expenses. Small amounts, but consistent. It wasn't about the money for us, and he knew that, but we appreciated the gesture. It showed that someone on their side was finally taking some responsibility. Jake and I made it clear, the issue was never financial. It was about the complete disregard for boundaries, respect, and the emotional damage that had piled up over time. In the weeks that followed, life started to feel normal again. We focused on the parts of our world that actually mattered: our friends, our careers, our relationship. We even took a short trip to the mountains just to breathe, reset, and reconnect without all the noise. My parents and Jake's parents continued to stay in touch with Sally. They respected our decision to stay out of it, though. My mom mentioned, carefully, that Sally had started seeing a therapist. That gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe, eventually, she'd start to reflect. Maybe she'd grow. But regardless of what she does or doesn't do, I've come to terms with something important: not all relationships are meant to last, even if they're family. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to protect your peace. As for Andrew's side of the family, the fallout was significant but not irreversible. His parents are still upset, but according to Rachel, they're slowly rebuilding trust with him. Rachel told me she's cautiously optimistic that if Andrew stays on this path, he might be able to help guide Sally towards something healthier. Though even she admitted, it's going to be a long, uphill road. For me, the biggest lesson in all of this was the importance of boundaries. Cutting off my sister hurt more than I can describe, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have my life back. And I've finally realized that being related to someone doesn't mean you have to let them poison your peace. Jake and I are stronger now, more united than ever. And while a part of me still misses the sister I used to have, I've accepted that person may no longer exist. So now, I'm choosing to focus on the people who show up with love and honesty, the ones who lift me up instead of tearing me down. I'm choosing peace, joy, and clarity. And after everything, that honestly feels like a win. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I really did.